In the name of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, when I was 17 years old, I was a pre-theology student at Wycliffe College, and I was enrolled in what they called lay theology courses, which were given by the faculty of Wycliffe College. That means that everything was at the university level, since all divinity students were also allowed to take the classes for credit towards their degree. You could say that my call to ministry came at an early age, although I really didn't pursue it until I was 27. One such course that I took was on the life and times of the Apostle Paul, taught by Dr. Richard Longnecker, where we studied the missionary journeys of Paul. The Apostle Paul traveled from Jerusalem all the way to Rome, preaching the gospel and ministering to the people wherever he went. That is why we have so many pastoral letters, called the epistles, to the various cities like Rome, Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi, and Thessalonica. Not because Paul thought it would be nice to write them a letter, but that he had already been there and met the people and could speak to their situation. Paul had invested himself, his very thoughts and being, and his spiritual reputation into the churches that were established in each of those places that he visited. Although there is not a specific letter to the Athenians in our Bible, there is, however, a pretty detailed account of Paul's sermon to the people of Athens, who would have been immersed in the philosophical Greek culture and system of gods that they worshipped. Paul himself was highly educated and was taught Greek culture as well as his family faith of Judaism in his privileged upbringing. This brings me then to the reading from the book of Acts today. Paul is in Athens at a common gathering known as the Areopagus, where court cases were heard, where debates took place, and where philosophers argued their positions on both the state of the world, humanity, and the gods. And like any good orator, Paul looked for an entry point where he could begin his address to the people of Athens. Now, you have to believe me that it took plenty of courage and conviction for Paul to even attempt to address this highly educated community. It took guts. So Paul begins by identifying with the people. Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. Butters them up a little bit. Paul had toured their city and was familiar with the many chapels and shrines to the various gods. What Paul does is identify the one shrine dedicated to the unknown God, and that becomes Paul's hook to catch them and then begin to reel them in as the people then began to listen to Paul's message. What therefore you worship as unknown, Paul says, I now proclaim to you as the God who made the world and everything in it. He who is Lord of both heaven and earth does not live in shrines made by human hands, because he himself is the one who gives life to all mortals and breath to all living things. So Paul begins describing a spirit God who doesn't live in shrines and is not made of silver or gold, nor does he live in a statue made of stone. But the living God is all in all, and we are God's children and connected to that great Spirit God. For in God we live and move and have our being, Paul says in Acts. I find this idea to be one of the most liberating things that Paul has ever said about faith, about God, and about us. This is Paul at his most pantheistic. This is Paul at the raw nature of spirituality, which is not far off of my understanding of native spirituality. And I believe for Paul, and I believe this myself, that it is not such a mysterious or uncommon thing that we should find ourselves in the presence of God. It's not really that difficult. Let us just open our eyes and see that God is all around us, that God is in us, that God isn't hiding, and we are called to rest in the spiritual presence of the one who loves us, of the one who breathes life into us, of the one who gives us joy, of the one who gives us hope, and of the one who gives us peace that passes all understanding. I absolutely love Paul's image of humanity, searching for God in the dark, groping to find something to make sense of anything and everything in our lives, and why it happens, and how we can cope with it. And when we find something, we say, no, that's not it. And then we find something else and say, no, that's not it either. And we never really hold on to what we have found because we think that it should be harder to find. But the fact is that God is not really that far from us at all. That God is really close to each one of us. Yes, we are physical beings, but we are spiritual beings as well. We do have 2 feet firmly planted on the earth, I hope you do, but our soul, our spirit, and our hands and our eyes reach out for the Spirit and for heaven, which is also all around us. I am only slipping through a door that leads me from this world into the next when it is my time to go. This physical world is only temporary, but the spirit world is eternal, where love, joy, peace, hope, and reconciliation live forever. Yes, my friends, in God, in Jesus, in the Spirit, we live and move and have our being. Now, the Gospel of John for today talks about the Spirit of truth that Jesus will release into the world and into us, his followers, because we abide in him and he abides in us. We are not orphans. We are children. We are loved of God and will always be loved of God. And of course, we love God back. We keep God's commandments and we walk in God's way, and we share God's love that we have experienced ourselves with others so that they can find God too and be at peace. So, my friends, be of good cheer and trust that all will be well. God in Jesus is here for us and stands close to us and leads us through the storm to the peaceful garden of our hearts and minds and soul. May God bless you today and always. Amen.